Alright, well guess what? The truth isn't the only thing out there. Thrills and chills are out there as well. Hello and welcome to another episode of Sci-Fi-Night Top 5. I'm your host, Sebastian Vendel-Martinez, and since I love being freaked out, in this episode we're checking out the 5 creepiest, scariest, and most disturbing episodes of the X-Files. So, being a show that dealt with aliens, monsters, ghosts, witches, demons, and all kinds of other freaky stuff like creepy little kids. So many creepy little kids. Anyway, obviously the X-Files has had quite a few scary episodes that kept viewers awake at night, wondering what was creeping about outside. Sure, a lot of the episodes haven't aged all that well and are a little cheesy by today's standard, with the scares to be taken with a grain of salt. But that doesn't mean that there aren't genuinely creepy moments as well. Remember that creepy-ass fluke man from Season 2's The Host? How about the invisible red-eyed forest monsters in the Season 5 episode Detour? Or what about all the freaky voodoo stuff in the underrated Season 7 episode Thief? Aw man, throughout the course of 10 seasons, the X-Files sure delivered quite a few chills, and as usual, we've got a top 5 list for this topic. Alright, well since I'm such a huge X-Files fan and there's just too much to list, we're gonna have not one, but 2 honorable mentions. Season 5's Folie à Deux and Season 8's Badla. So the first honorable mention, Folie à Deux, which is French for A Madness Shared by Two, is one of the first X-Files episodes I ever saw. And as a little boy, peering through the crack of a door to the living room where my parents were watching, it scared the crap out of me. I'll never forget this part in particular that scared me shitless when Mulder is chasing after the monster. Yeah, imagine seeing that completely out of context. Anyway, in this episode, a disgruntled office worker becomes convinced that his boss is some kind of evil insect monster turning employees into mindless zombies.
Listen very carefully. It's here.
Wait, that doesn't sound crazy at all. That sounds like literally everybody who has ever worked an office job. The man ends up taking hostages and nobody seems to believe him or see the monster. That is until Agent Mulder catches a glimpse of him in the dark. All of a sudden, now it's Mulder who everyone thinks is crazy, and this episode features brain-dead zombies as well as a creepy-ass insect monster. So yeah, not necessarily super creepy, but as it was the first X-Files episode that scared the crap out of me as a boy, this definitely has some nostalgic points to it.
You must have seen this coming.
In the second honorable mention from Season 8, Mulder is gone and it's up to Scully to carry the paranormal mantle as an Indian mystic wizard spirit type thing from a beggar caste makes its way to the United States for revenge, and rightfully so I might add. So not only is this guy's little screeching along super creepy, but he actually burrs his way inside people via their ass and hitches a ride inside them as their blood is slowly exsanguinating. Yeah, not only that, but he can actually kind of shapeshift and take the form of pretty much anyone to hide right out in plain sight. His way of taking disguises and hiding inside people makes him hard to catch up until a surprisingly emotional moment at the end, which I won't spoil. Overall, this little dude is super creepy, and what he does to his victims is truly the stuff of nightmares.
Well, considering what I found here today, I'd say I have to agree.
Alright, so that brings us to number 5 spot, which goes to Die Hand die Verletz. Season 2, episode 14 gives us Die Hand die Verletz, which is German for the hand that wounds. It starts off with a satanic cult that controls a small town, and they're not even the bad guys.
In the name of the Lords of Darkness, rulers of the earth, kings of the underworld.
Anyway, Scully and Mulder take off to the town to investigate a butchered student who seems to have been killed in a violent ritual. And their arrival seems to incite the presence of a demon, maybe even the devil himself, or should we say, herself. The mystery leads the agent to the local school and substitute teacher Mrs. Paddock, who is a very obvious wolf in sheep's clothing, but that doesn't really bring the episode down, which is still pretty damn great and regularly shows up on many top 20 lists of people's favorite episodes. This is a straight up hour of horror that invokes stuff like dead pig fetuses, raiding frogs, Satanism, killer snakes, cut out body parts, most likely the devil, and even a really chilling finale with images reminiscent of school shootings, which makes it downright unnerving. And that's the part that really creeps me out. Also, of course, Mrs. Paddock is a great villain, it's a great episode, and for now, this substitute will remain on the number 5 spot.
Something is here. A presence amongst us. Angry, I can feel it.
And that brings us to number 4 spot, which goes to Roadrunners. Alright, make no mistake, the only thing this 4th episode of the 8th season has to do with Looney Tunes is the fact that it takes place in the desert. Classic X-Files and Breaking Bad writer Vince Gilligan wrote an uncharacteristically dark installment that begins with a handicapped man being brutally beaten to death by members of an insane cult. Yeah, that shit is super brutal and dark, and it happens within the first couple of minutes of the episode. In one of her first cases after the departure of David Duchovny's Mulder, Agent Scully ventures off on her own against the wishes of her new partner, Agent Doggett, to investigate the brutal murder. She ends up in a tiny little village of crazy people who are trying to violently bring about the second coming of Christ. Alright, so one thing that really bugs me is the fact that this town is so obviously crazy, and you'd think that Scully would get out of her and kick a little bit more ass, but to be fair, it does work to the strength of the episode having her trapped there, and there are some circumstances that do lead her to stay there as well. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, she's stuck in the middle of a desert, whatever, I'll buy it. But oh man, once the cult starts going crazy and planting this gross slug inside people, which is disgusting by the way, it turns into flat-out horror with Agent Doggett racing against time to save Scully from these freaks, and the final showdown inside the bus with a cult trying to get inside is really tense and creepy. Sure, there's no Mulder in it, but this is without a doubt one of the scariest X-Files episodes ever, and it slithers its way to the number 4 spot on our list.
It seems to be a point of entry for a parasitic organism that has taken up residence along your spine.
Alright, so this brings us to my number 3 spot, and one of the most underrated episodes ever, Sanguinarium. In this criminally overlooked episode, which was the 6th of season 4, Mulder and Scully get called to a hospital where some of the doctors seem to, for no real reason, be committing horrible acts of malpractice, resulting in the violent deaths of several patients. For example, one patient who goes in for liposuction but ends up basically getting stabbed to death. Check it out.
That's a lie! I think this patient is finished.
Yeah, and this is how the episode starts off, setting a really creepy and dark tone for the entire episode. Mulder, being Mulder, finds the signs pointing to witchcraft and the occult, and a face-changing witch killing people for vanity and greed.
Well, if it's that simple, why don't you put out an APB for someone riding a broom and wearing a tall black hat?
Yeah, and anyone who's ever been operated on will probably think twice before going under a knife again after watching this episode. The idea that a doctor, someone we trust with our lives, could lose control and start violently murdering us while we're sedated is a scary ass thought, especially when combined with witchcraft and black magic. And from people puking up nails, literal bloodbaths, faces being peeled off, and surgical tools being placed inside people's bodies, while they're alive I might add, this episode is just as scary and gross as it is underrated and well worth the number 3 spot. Alright, so this brings us to the second scariest X-Files episode ever, Via Negativa. In the 7th episode of a much underrated season 8, Agent Doggett and Assistant Director Skinner get thrust into what is almost X-Files meets A Nightmare on Elm Street, as we have a three-eyed cult leader brutally killing people in their dreams.
Whoever did this left not even a trace how. No prints, no forensic evidence whatsoever. Agent Leeds sedan, The cult house, Agent Stedman's condo. We're all locked from the inside.
From the very first scene, this episode raises the stakes by showing us blood, gore, and sheer terror unlike what we're really used to in the X-Files.
They're all dead.
Alright, so this is a real showcase episode for Robert Patrick, who plays the newly added Agent Doggett, and what I really love is the fact that this is the episode where he kind of starts believing in the supernatural and starts questioning reality and what he thinks is actually normal and possible.
Everything seemed real. But it was a dream. Dream that ended in their deaths.
Anthony Tibbett is in a coma, never to regain consciousness.
He knows me now.
Series veteran Frank Spotsness wrote this episode, and along time with first-time director Tony Warmby, we get what is quite possibly the most eerie and atmospheric X-Files episode ever made. The idea that villain Anthony Tippett has entered a higher plane of existence by venturing into darkness and can reach us in our subconscious while sleeping is a creepy thought. On top of that, the atmosphere of this episode is just so on point, with the lines between reality and dream constantly being blurred and creating an overarching sense of unease. And from rats eating people alive to severed heads to the incredibly atmospheric and frightening finale, where Doggett is basically mind-controlled into trying to kill Scully, we get what is possibly the best episode of the last 3 seasons. It's also the second X-Files episode ever to receive a parental guidance warning before broadcast, and they really did take risks here. Despite this being a Doggett-centered episode out of reasons for necessity of filming, this is such an awesome and underrated installment, proving that Season 8 is much better than people remember, and the number 2 spot is well earned by this episode, which is a real nightmare.
What if Tippett could invade his victim's consciousness in their sleep? And that's why you'd be afraid to fall asleep, right? If you thought your nightmares might come true?
Alright, so that brings us to the number 1 spot, and the true X-Files fans out there have gotta know what it is. Of course, it's the most controversial X-Files episode ever made, Home. Season 4, Episode 2, titled Home, definitely does not make you feel cozy, but in fact it was the first episode to receive a parental advisory warning, and Fox actually banned the episode from being rerun due to complaints and the super dark content. So what could get Fox this worked up over an X-Files episode? Well, how about a little tale of murder, incest, and brutality that begins with a baby being buried alive. The dead baby in question ends up being found with all kinds of deformities, leading Mulder and Scully to investigate the tiny town of Home, where they end up running into the Peacocks, a gross, violent, and inbred group of brothers, or whatever you call it when your brother is also your father. Anyway, they will stop at nothing to protect their family and way of life. This episode features violence and themes that are truly shocking for network television of the 90s, way before Netflix and HBO gave us stuff like The Punisher and Game of Thrones. The Peacock's assault of the deputy's home was downright disturbing. And the discovery that Mulder and Scully make at the Peacock's house had fans looking under their beds for years to come, scared of what was hiding beneath where we sleep. This is an episode that's just a little too close to feeling possible and real, and is supposedly based on real-life events detailed by Charlie Chaplin. The ending isn't really a happy one either, and overall the episode is equal parts creepy, disturbing, scary, and honestly excellent and really well made, and has to be the #1 spot here, as it's haunted fans ever since its release. So that about does it for this episode of Sci-Fi-Night Top 5. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've got a different list, please by all means let us know what your top 5 Scariest X-Files episodes are in the comments below. Now, of course, X-Files month will continue up until the release of a new season in January. We're definitely looking forward to it. We hope you guys are too. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you guys next time.
So, who are you guys, anyhow?
Agents Mulder and Scully, FBI.